In this video, I will first of all explain to you why we are irrational. Then second of all, I will tell you why it's really not good to be irrational. Then third of all, I will give you a 3-step process in order to eliminate your irrationality, alongside with tons of proven biases and also strategies, which just in general will make your life a lot better. Now you might be wondering, Simon, why the hell should I listen to you? And that's a good question, so let me give you the answer. When I was about 12 to 13 years old, so when I was really young, I first discovered the concept of rationality and irrationality. Basically, since then, I've tried to become more rational and eliminate my irrationality. Now, for that purpose, I've also looked into various topics like psychology and philosophy, for now over half a decade now. So yeah, I will give you everything I learned along my journey, alongside with teachings of highly influential and also just very wise people. However, just quickly subscribe to my YouTube channel for more informational content. Now, first of all, why are we even irrational? Well, the problem are emotions. Emotions originally evolved to keep us alive and also just to communicate. But they're so ancient and they're so hardwired into our brains that they frequently cause misinterpretations of certain situations. And because they can be quite powerful, they consistently overpower our logical reasoning. And I can already hear some people out there saying, well, Simon, look, we have evolved, we have changed. Just look around at all this new amazing technology we have. And to that I have to say, no, we really have not changed that much. And we are just as irrational as before. Now we only have different outlets and just different tools we can use to unleash that irrationality. If you want to see a prime example of that, and just go onto Twitter or X, however you want to call it. So now that we know why we are rational, let's look at second, why it's really bad for us. And to be honest, there's so many examples here. The bottom line is that emotions don't really have your long-term best interest in mind. Let me give you 2 examples to show you why that is the case. The first is, imagine you want to do something productive, but you really don't feel like it. If you give in to that emotion, so in other words, if you are being irrational, that irrationality gets in your way of achieving your long-term goals and also your dreams. And then the second example is the following. Imagine you're in a heated argument with a loved one, for example, your partner, and then all of a sudden you have this emotional breakout and you just completely lash out at them. You scream at them and all of those not so nice things. Short term, this might feel satisfying or good or whatever it is, but long term, this can be quite detrimental to your relationship, especially if you repeat that mistake over and over again. So now that we know that it's really not that good for us, how can we eliminate irrationality and at the same time become more rational? So third, how do we become more rational? Well, the key to overcoming irrationality is by, first of all, identifying the different types of irrationality there are, then recognizing them and consistently striving to be more rational by recognizing emotions, examining them, and therefore eliminating them. Keep in mind though that it's basically possible to become fully rational, and second of all, we're not born rational, so it's a process. You have to learn it, and that takes time. You might even need years. That's completely reasonable. So now let's look at the 3-step process I've talked about earlier. First, you have to recognize low-grade irrationality. So that is the first type of irrationality that we're going to talk about. And those are just subtle emotional influences, just like your mood, for example. And those subtle emotional influences can influence your thinking. You want to just recognize that because it's super hard to get rid of that. The second step is identifying and avoiding high-grade irrationality. High-grade irrationality is essentially overthinking low-grade irrationality, which can lead to reactive and just irrational behavior. Let me give you an example to explain this better. Imagine that you're just in a bad mood, and it just so happens that your partner sits right next to you. And now you overthink that you're in a bad mood, and all of a sudden you're making the conclusion that your partner is really at fault here. And so you start blaming it on them. But that's really irrational, because who knows why you're in a bad mood? Could be an entirely different reason. So that was the second step. And so now let's go to the third step, which is training your rational brain. And there's a couple strategies for that, which I will give to you later. But now let's first of all focus on some biases and also some triggers which can really undermine rationality. Let's first of all go over 7 powerful biases. The first one is the pleasure principle. In general, we tend to avoid pain and seek pleasure. This is really a core principle which really influences basically all irrational behavior. Second, the confirmation bias. We tend to only really acknowledge evidence that supports our existing beliefs, thus just reinforcing them. Third, the conviction bias. When we are convinced of something, we will just go to great lengths in order to validate that, even if there is contrary evidence. Like, we will just ignore that. Fourth, the appearance bias. We often judge people based on like appearances, assuming that their character matches their looks. It's also called the halo effect oftentimes. Now, number 5 is the group bias, which is that we tend to accept the values and beliefs of a group which we are a part of, even when we don't agree, because being part of a group is vital to us. And I encourage you, just look up studies to this bias, because the results are just absolutely shocking and just insane. They're wild, so definitely go check some studies out. Next up is the blame bias, which is essentially that we tend to blame others instead of accepting our own responsibility when it comes to our own faults. We often even distort the memory of what actually happened. And then the last bias I'm going to talk about here is the superiority bias. We tend to believe that we are ethical and rational, while we at the same time tend to believe that others are not. And I can just say that usually is not the case. Just keep that in mind. But I've also wanted to talk about some triggers here. So let's go about some hot triggers which can trigger like intense emotion, so you really want to watch out for them. The first one is childhood triggers. So these can be powerful experiences from your childhood which trigger like intense emotions, and they can lead to irrational behavior even in adulthood. Second, sudden gains or losses. Unexpected successes or failures can trigger intense emotion, which just overrules rationality. The third trigger is rising pressure. So yeah, just high stress levels can really diminish your rational thinking. That's what this is about. Fourth is inflaming individuals. Just some people are just really good at triggering intense emotions in other people, so you want to watch out for those people. And then last, the group effect. Group dynamics, especially in like emotionally charged environments, just like sports events, can lead us to lose rationality. And so with biases and triggers out of the way, let's go over the strategies I promised you earlier. And those are strategies which can bring out like your rational self more effectively, or they will just help you with that. The first one is know yourself very well. So that means observe your behavior, especially in like high stress scenarios, or if you've made decisions, especially if they were bad ones. Go through the process of what led you to make that certain decision. Second is, I've talked about this many times now, examine your emotions. So question why certain emotions arise and then what triggers them as well. One powerful tip here, journaling can really help with this process, so definitely try that out. The third is, and I've used this personally a lot, is increase your reaction time. So if you're faced with like a trigger event, or like you see yourself becoming like more irrational, just take a step back and like delay your reaction and just, get some space and time between you and your final decision or whatever it is. Fourth, accept people as facts. Rather than expecting others to think exactly like you, recognize them as what they are, just humans which are flawed. This will just spare you so much frustration and also conflict. So definitely do that. Fifth is balancing thinking and also emotion, because you cannot really separate the two, and emotions tend to have like high energy, and that high energy can be really channeled in like some very productive ways. So try to find like the optimum ratio of like emotions to like rational thinking, so to speak. Next up is love the irrational, because instead of looking at rationality as something ascetic or even painful, try to look at it as something which will allow you to like unlock like deeper pleasures and also just help you like with your goals and dreams in life. And then the last point is just engage with different viewpoints from time to time. 2 tips I can give you here, which like this is something I do very often. First of all, for example, on Twitter or like X, follow people which really don't share like your opinion, like the exact opposite opinion in fact. And then just look at what they're saying or tweeting and think to yourself like, is something true about this? Is there like some gem which I can extract and use for myself? Then the second tip I can give you here is just use AI. Like use something like ChatGPT. Go up to ChatGPT and say, yo, this is my belief, can you challenge me a little bit? And then like go into like a debate or something. This can really like challenge your beliefs and maybe open you up to like different perspectives. If you learned something, then like this video right now, and also subscribe if you just want to see like more content which is aimed at actually bettering your life. You can also follow me on Instagram. The link for that is in the description down below. With all of that being said, I hope you're having a great day, and let's fucking go, man.